The truck was gone. Marcus stood on the asphalt and stared at the empty space where his truck had been parked 3 hours ago. He looked left. He looked right. He walked to the edge of the lot and looked down the street, half expecting to see it sitting somewhere close, maybe moved by a security guard, maybe just a few spots over. But there was nothing, just flat gray asphalt and the heat rising off it in slow, lazy waves. He pulled out his phone and called his own number, which was the only way he could think to confirm this was actually happening. It rang. No answer. Because the truck was not near him. The truck was somewhere else. And that somewhere else was a problem that had a clock attached to it. His daughters got out of school at 3:15. It was 11:47 in the morning. Marcus Deal had been wiring electrical panels in the east wing of the Voss Industries building for 3 weeks. He was a subcontractor. He came in every morning at 7, parked in the same overflow lot he had used since his first day, and worked until 5. Nobody had said anything about the lot. Nobody had put a cone by his truck. Nobody had knocked on the east wing door and told him to move it. He found the notice on a small metal post near the entrance. It was white with black letters, and it was half covered by a hedge that had grown wide and lazy over the past few seasons. He had to push 2 thick branches aside to read the full thing. Private lot. Unauthorized vehicles will be towed at owner's expense. Contact impound at the number listed below. He stared at the sign for a long moment. Then he took a photo of the hedge covering it. Then he called the number. The woman on the phone was polite the way people are polite when they repeat the same information 50 times a day and have stopped hearing themselves say it. The release fee was $340, cash or credit card. The lot was on Fenwick Road, 40 minutes south of where he was standing. Hours were 8 to 6, Monday through Saturday. Marcus thanked her, hung up, and did the math in his head. $340. He had moved money 4 days ago to cover the school activity fee for his younger daughter, Claire, who was 6, and had wanted badly to go on the class trip to the nature center. He had moved it because he had promised her she could go, and he did not break promises to his daughters if he could help it. His next paycheck was Friday. Today was Tuesday. He had $47 and some change in his account. The truck had his tools in it, a full set of electrical tools that had taken him years to collect and replace and upgrade. His wire strippers, his multimeter, his voltage tester, his fish tape, his drill with the 3-inch spade bits he used for running cable through studs. If he had to replace all of it, the number was close to $800. He also had a car seat in the back, because Claire's booster seat lived there. It had lived there since he became the only parent doing pickup, which had been 2 years now. He stood in the parking lot and let the math sit in front of him. He did not panic. He had learned, over the past 2 years, that panic was a luxury he could not afford in the middle of a situation that required solving. Panic was for after. For the drive home when both girls were asleep, and the house was quiet, and there was nothing to do but sit at the kitchen table and let the weight of things settle on his shoulders. Right now there was a problem that had a shape. Problems with shapes could be handled. He went back inside. The Voss Industries building was the kind of place that made you feel the distance between yourself and other people in a very specific way. The lobby had marble floors that reflected the overhead lights in clean, flat sheets. The receptionist desk was long and curved, and staffed by a woman in a navy blazer who had a headset on, and a practice smile that deployed at exactly the same angle for everyone who walked through the doors. Marcus was wearing his work shirt. It had his name on it, printed above the left breast pocket in small block letters. It also had a faint line of dried plaster near the collar from a job 2 weeks back that had not quite come out in the wash. He was aware of both of these things as he crossed the lobby. He found his site supervisor, Dale, in the East Wing break room eating a sandwich. Dale was in his mid-50s, a man shaped by decades of construction sites and long drives between them. He had a good face, the kind that looked like it had weathered things and arrived at a reasonable peace with most of them. He was not a complicated man. He liked order, hated conflict, and had a deep, practiced instinct for knowing which battles would cost more than they were worth. Marcus explained the situation in about 45 seconds. Dale set down his sandwich. He looked at Marcus with an expression that was not without sympathy. He rubbed the back of his neck. "They towed it?" he said. "Yes." "From the overflow lot across the street?" "From the overflow lot across the street." Dale was quiet for a moment. That lot belongs to the building, he said. Voss owns it. They've been trying to clear it out this week because of some event this afternoon. Marcus nodded slowly. There's a sign, he said. It's half covered by a bush. I know. I didn't see it. I know, Dale said again. He picked his sandwich back up. Not because he was hungry, Marcus thought, but because he needed something to do with his hands. Look, Marcus, the person who would have authorized the tow is the property manager, or someone above her. And by above her, I mean, he tilted his head toward the ceiling, toward the upper floors of the building. Who's above her? Marcus said. Dale looked at him the way people look at someone who is about to do something that cannot be undone. Diana Voss, he said, the CEO. Marcus looked at the ceiling. He thought about his daughters. He thought about Claire's booster seat in the back of the truck. He thought about the sign half swallowed by a hedge. He thought about $340 and a paycheck that was 3 days away. Where's her office? He said. Dale made a sound that was not quite a laugh and not quite a groan. Marcus, you don't want to go up there. What floor? Dale looked at him for another long moment. He seemed to be waiting for Marcus to come to his own senses. When it became clear that was not going to happen, he sighed. 15, he said. But I'm telling you, they won't let you pass the elevator. Marcus thanked him and left the break room. He was not angry, not in the way people mean when they say that word. He was not hot or shaking or rehearsing speeches in his head. What he felt was something more like clarity, the kind that comes when a situation removes all the optional things and leaves only what is required. What was required was simple. He needed his truck back before 3:15. He could not pay the impound fee. The person responsible for the tow worked on the 15th floor. He was going to the 15th floor. The elevator opened on 15 with a soft chime. The floor was quiet, carpeted in a deep charcoal gray. The kind of quiet that comes from thick walls and expensive glass and the understanding that everyone on this floor is paid to think, not to make noise. There was a small reception area with 2 low chairs, a table with a single orchid on it, and a young man behind a desk who was probably 26 and had the careful, composed energy of someone who had been trained to stop things before they became problems. His name badge said Kevin. Kevin looked at Marcus. He took in the work shirt, the name patch, the plaster near the collar. His expression did not change, but something behind his eyes did a small, rapid calculation. Can I help you? Kevin said. I need to speak with Diana Voss, Marcus said. Do you have an appointment? No. Kevin nodded slowly. The way people nod when the answer they expected has arrived on schedule. Ms. Voss is in a call right now. If you leave your name and contact information, I can have someone follow up with you this afternoon. I need to speak with her now, Marcus said. It's about a vehicle that was towed from the property lot this morning. My vehicle. I have 2 daughters who need to be picked up from school at 3:15, and my tools are in that truck. I'm not here to cause a problem. I'm here because she's the person who can fix this, and I'd like to ask her to. Kevin looked at him. The calculation behind his eyes ran again, a little longer this time. One moment, Kevin said. He picked up his desk phone and turned slightly away, speaking in a low voice. Marcus stood where he was. He did not sit down in one of the low chairs. He did not look around the office with the expression people sometimes get in places like this, the one that mixes admiration with a kind of quiet resentment. He just stood, hands at his sides, steady. Kevin put the phone down and turned back. Ms. Voss is finishing a call. She'll be a few minutes. I'll wait, Marcus said. He waited 4 minutes. Kevin's phone buzzed once. Kevin looked at the screen, then looked at Marcus. You can go in, he said, and his tone had shifted in a way that was small but noticeable. Not warmer exactly, more careful, like he had just recalibrated something. Marcus walked to the door at the end of the short hallway. He knocked once. A voice on the other side said to come in. He opened the door. The office was large. One full wall of glass looked out over the campus and the city beyond it, the skyline sitting low and gray and patient in the late morning heat. The desk was clean. Not performatively clean, but the clean of someone who processes everything quickly and moves on. There were no personal photographs visible from where he stood. There was one framed document on the wall to his left that he did not try to read. Diana Voss was standing behind the desk. She was still holding her phone, not at her ear but in her hand, the way people hold it when a call has just ended, and they have not quite put it down yet. She was a tall woman. Her hair was dark with gray beginning at the temples. She wore a gray jacket over a white shirt, and the expression on her face was the careful, neutral expression of a person who has trained herself not to show what she is thinking before she has finished thinking it. She looked at him. He looked at her. Neither of them spoke for a moment. Then Marcus said, "My name is Marcus Deal. I'm one of the electricians working in your East Wing. My truck was towed from the overflow lot this morning. I need to ask you to help me get it back." She did not say anything immediately. She did not gesture toward a chair. She just looked at him with those careful, measuring eyes. And Marcus, who had not asked anyone for help in a very long time, stood in the middle of that quiet, expensive room and waited. Diana Voss had a rule she had followed for 30 years. She did not make decisions in front of people until she had all the information she needed. It was not coldness. It was discipline. Coldness was careless. What Diana practiced was something deliberate and exact, the kind of stillness that comes from understanding that the first thing you say in any difficult moment is the thing people remember longest. She looked at the man standing in her office. She registered the work shirt, the name on the pocket, the dried plaster, the steadiness of him, which was not the steadiness of someone who was calm. It was the steadiness of someone who had gotten very practiced at holding things together. She put her phone face down on the desk. "Tell me what happened," she said. Marcus told her. He did not perform it. He did not build to anything, or try to make it land a certain way. He spoke the way people speak when they are tired of theater and just need the facts to do the work. He parked in the overflow lot. He had parked there every day for 3 weeks. He went inside at 7, came down at 11:45, and the truck was gone. He found the sign. He called the impound lot. The fee was $340. He did not have $340 until Friday. His daughters got out of school at 3:15. The truck had his tools, and it had his younger daughter's booster seat. He stopped when there was nothing left to say. Diana was quiet for a moment. She was doing the same thing she always did when someone brought her a problem. She was separating the emotional content from the factual content so she could look at both clearly. The factual content here was straightforward. A subcontractor had parked in a lot that was not clearly signed. The lot had been cleared at her instruction, and the resulting situation was not one she had considered when she picked up the phone that morning. The emotional content was harder to look at, so she set it aside for now. "You said the sign was covered," she said. "By a hedge," Marcus said. "On the right side of the entrance. I took a picture." He held his phone out. Diana walked around the desk and looked at the screen. The sign was there, visible, but the hedge had grown wide enough that a full third of the post was buried in leaves and branches. Without knowing to look for it, it would be easy to walk past. She handed the phone back without comment. She returned to her side of the desk, but she did not sit. Standing felt more honest right now. "What is the name of the impound company?" she said. Marcus read it off his phone. She picked up her cell, not the desk phone, and called the number from memory. It turned out she knew the lot manager. The lot manager took most of the towels from this building and several others nearby. They had spoken perhaps 4 times in 5 years. Not a warm relationship, a functional one. She identified herself. She said she wanted to authorize the release of a vehicle, a Ford F-150 registered to Marcus Deal, without the owner present, and she would be covering the release fee by card. There was a brief back and forth. The lot manager confirmed the process. Diana provided her card number. She did not put it on speaker. She did not perform the gesture. She simply handled it, and then she hung up. She looked at Marcus. "Your truck will be released. I'm sending my driver to bring it back here so you don't have to arrange transport to the lot. He was scheduled for an airport pickup this afternoon, but I'll arrange an alternate." Marcus looked at her. Something moved across his face that was not gratitude exactly but was close to it. More like surprise that the situation had resolved in a direction he had not fully allowed himself to plan for. "Thank you," he said. It was simple. It was enough. She almost let him leave. She almost said something like, "Have a good rest of your day," and returned to the work on her desk. She had a board preparation meeting in 90 minutes, and 3 documents waiting for her signature, and the investor delegation arriving at noon. But she did not let him leave. "Sit down," she said. Marcus looked at her. He had the expression of a man who had come in prepared for a negotiation and was now unsure what game he was in. "Please," she said, which was not a word she used carelessly. She used it because she meant it. She gestured to the chair across from her desk, and then, after a brief pause, she came around and sat in the other chair, the one beside it, instead of returning behind the desk. It was a choice. She made it deliberately. Marcus sat. He held his phone loosely in his hand. He did not look around the office the way some people did when they first sat in it, cataloging the size of it, the view, the weight of the space. He just looked at her. "How long have you been on the subcontract?" she said. 3 weeks, he said. "What subcontractor are you under?" He told her the name, Clifton Electrical Services. She recognized it. Clifton had been one of their approved subcontractors for the past 4 years. They handled the electrical work on most of the campus renovation projects. She had approved the renewal of that arrangement herself, 18 months ago, as part of a wider facilities budget review. She had looked at the numbers, confirmed they were within market range, and moved on. "What are you being paid per hour?" she said. Marcus looked at her steadily. The question was not what he had expected. $22, he said. She kept her face even. She was good at that. "And your experience level?" "Licensed master electrician," he said. 18 years. She let a moment pass. "What is the going rate for a licensed master electrician in this market?" 34 to 38, he said, depending on the scope. Diana looked at the window. She looked at it the way she sometimes looked at things when she was letting information settle into the correct slot in her mind. A licensed master electrician with 18 years of experience was being paid $22 an hour to wire her building. The contract Clifton billed to Voss Industries accounted for labor at $31 per hour. She had approved that rate herself. She had not, at any point, asked what portion of that $31 went to the worker actually doing the work. She had not asked because she had not thought it was her business to ask. The subcontractor managed their people. Voss Industries managed the subcontractor. That was the structure. That was how it was supposed to work. She looked back at Marcus. He was not watching her with the expression of someone who knew what he had just told her. He was not waiting to see what she did with the information. He had answered her questions the way he had described the tow, plainly, without performance, because she had asked. "Do you know any of the other electricians on the job?" she said. "6 of us on the East Wing crew," he said. "I know them all." "What are they being paid?" He told her. The range was 19 to 23. One man on the crew had 22 years of experience. He was being paid $19.50 an hour. He had a wife with a health condition and had taken the job because the schedule was stable. Diana stood up, not out of agitation, out of the need to move while she thought, which was a habit she had developed at some point in the last decade, without noticing it. She walked to the window. The campus spread out below her. She could see the East Wing from here. She could see the construction scaffolding still in place along the exterior. If she looked far enough, she could see the overflow lot across the street. She had made a decision this morning from this window. A fast decision. The lot needed to be clear. She picked up the phone. The lot was cleared. She had not thought about who was in it. Why would she? She was on the 15th floor. She turned back to Marcus. "The hedge will be trimmed, and the sign repositioned before end of day," she said. "I'll make sure of it." Marcus nodded. "I want to ask you something," she said. She came back and sat down again, not behind the desk, but in the chair beside him. "In 3 weeks of working here, what has your experience been like? Not the parking, the job itself, the conditions." Marcus looked at her for a long moment. He seemed to be deciding something. Not whether to trust her, more like whether the situation called for the whole truth or just enough of it. He gave her the whole truth. He told her about the supply delays that pushed their hours into shorter windows. He told her about the scheduling changes that came without notice, which meant he sometimes arranged for a neighbor to pick up his daughters, then rearranged his childcare when the schedule shifted back. He told her about the safety walkthrough that had been promised at the start of the project and had not happened. He told her that the portable restroom on the East Wing site had been broken for 9 days. He told her that when the crew raised these issues with the site foreman, the answer was usually some version of, "That's above my pay grade." He said all of this without heat, just one fact after another, in order, like a man reading from a list he had been keeping in his head for a while, because there was no one who had asked him to read it out loud until now. Diana listened. She had been in enough difficult conversations to know when someone was exaggerating for effect, and when someone was simply telling her what was. Marcus was doing the latter. Every detail he gave her was specific. The number of days the restroom had been broken, the exact phrase the foreman used, the specific order in which the scheduling changes had come. These were not the details of someone building a case. These were the details of someone who had been living inside a situation and knew it with the granular accuracy of daily experience. She thought about the contract she had renewed 18 months ago. She thought about the numbers she had approved. She thought about the $31 per hour billed and the $22 per hour reaching the man sitting across from her. She had been running a company for 16 years. She understood margin. She understood the structure of subcontracting and the layers of cost built into every arrangement. She had never been naive about how any of it worked. But there was a difference, she was realizing now, between understanding how something works and having it sit across from you in a work shirt with a name patch, with 2 daughters and a booster seat, and a paycheck 3 days away. "Thank you for telling me that," she said. Marcus looked at her. He had the careful expression of someone deciding whether a thing said is going to amount to anything. He had heard "thank you for telling me" before. Usually it was the sentence right before nothing changed. "I mean it," she said, because she did, and because she could see from his expression that he was not sure she did, and she was not in the habit of letting people leave her office unsure about what she meant. Her desk phone lit up. Kevin's line. She glanced at it. The investor delegation was 20 minutes early. She stood. Marcus stood. They faced each other in the middle of the quiet office. "My driver's name is Glenn," she said. "Kevin will come down and get you when the truck is back on campus. It will be before noon." "I appreciate it," Marcus said. He said it simply, the way he said everything. She walked him to the door and opened it. Kevin was already standing in the hallway with the expression of a man managing several things at once. Marcus walked out. He did not look back. He moved with the same steadiness he had brought in with him, neither smaller nor larger than he had been when he arrived. Diana watched him reach the elevator. She watched the doors open. She watched them close. Then she turned to Kevin and said, "Pull the Clifton Electrical contract and put it on my desk. The full file. Every renewal, every labor rate, every invoice from the past 4 years." Kevin blinked. "Before the delegation?" "After the delegation," she said, "but on my desk today." She went back into her office. She sat behind her desk. She looked at the 3 documents waiting for her signature. She did not pick up the pen for a long moment. Below her, somewhere in the East Wing, 6 men with decades of experience between them were wiring a building and being paid $19 to $23 an hour, while the contract billing for them ran at $31. The portable restroom had been broken for 9 days. The safety walkthrough had not happened, and none of this had appeared in any report on her desk because the structure she had built, the one with layers and subcontractors and site foremen and budget reviews, was working exactly as designed. The design, she thought, might be the problem. She picked up the pen. She signed the first document. She set the pen down. She looked at the window. The city sat there, patient and gray and completely unchanged. 15 floors below, her driver Glenn was already on his way to Fenwick Road. $340. 9 days. $19.50 an hour. She was going to need a bigger file. The Clifton Electrical Services file was thick. Not thick in the way files get when something is complicated. Thick in the way files get when something has been renewed and reapproved and signed off on so many times that the paperwork has started to look like evidence of due diligence without actually being it. Diana sat at her desk at 4:47 in the afternoon, with the investor delegation finally gone, a cold cup of coffee at her elbow, and the full file open in front of her. Kevin had pulled it without asking questions, which was one of the things she paid Kevin for. He had placed it on her desk in a neat stack held together with a binder clip, and he had quietly closed the door behind him on the way out. She went through it in order. The original contract was 4 years old. Clifton Electrical had come through a competitive bid process. 3 contractors had submitted. Clifton came in 12% below the nearest competitor. At the time, the facilities director, a man named Randall who had since retired, had written a brief internal memo noting that the rate was competitive and the company's references were solid. Diana had signed the approval. She remembered it vaguely, the way you remember things that were routine. The labor rate in that original contract was $29 per hour per licensed electrician. 18 months ago, when Diana had approved the renewal, the rate had been increased to $31. She found the renewal paperwork. It was 3 pages. The justification for the rate increase was listed as market adjustment, reflecting current labor cost trends. She had read it, found it reasonable, and signed it. She had not asked what the electricians themselves were making. The thought had not occurred to her. Why would it? The rate was billed at 31. Labor costs were embedded in that rate. The structure was standard. She found the most recent invoice from Clifton. 12 electricians on the current campus project. Hours billed at $31 per. She did the math on the monthly total. Then she put the invoice beside the information Marcus had given her. A crew of 6 in the East Wing. Wages ranging from $19.50 to $23 per hour. The gap between what Clifton billed and what they paid their people was not unusual in the subcontracting world. There were overhead costs, insurance, equipment, administrative expenses. A margin of 20 to 30% was considered normal. The margin here was closer to 40%, on the low end. She turned to the invoice from the previous quarter. Same structure. She went back another quarter. Same. She went back to the original contract. The billing rate then had been 29. She found, buried in a supplementary document from the original bid, a line estimating direct labor costs at $18 to $20 per hour. In 4 years, the billing rate had gone up by $2. She had not, in any of her reviews, asked what had happened to direct labor costs over that same period. She closed the file. She sat very still for a moment, the way she did when she was not managing her reaction, but simply letting it settle before she decided what to do with it. She was not angry at Clifton. What they were doing was legal. Common. The kind of thing that happened in the space between 2 companies when no one was looking directly at the space. She was not angry at Randall, who had run a competitive bid and accepted the lowest number. She was not angry at herself for signing a renewal that looked, on its face, like a minor administrative update. What she felt was harder to name than anger. It was the feeling that comes when you realize that the thing you thought you were running and the thing you were actually running are not the same thing. That the distance between them is not huge, not dramatic, not the kind of gap that shows up in audits or news stories. Just a quiet, structural distance that nobody had ever stood inside and named out loud. Until this morning, when a man in a work shirt had come in and answered her questions plainly. She called Kevin. I need 15 minutes on my calendar, with our facilities director and our legal counsel, she said. Tomorrow morning, first thing. Any agenda I should send? Kevin said. Tell them we're reviewing our subcontractor arrangements, she said, and pull the full vendor list. Everyone. Not just electrical. Everyone. Kevin was quiet for a half second. That's a long list. I know, Diana said. Start pulling. She hung up. She looked at the window. The city was beginning to go gold at the edges in the late afternoon light. In an hour, it would be dark. She picked up her cell and, after a moment, called Glenn. Did you get the truck back? She said. Yes, ma'am, Glenn said. He had the unhurried voice of a man who had worked for her for 7 years and had seen enough to not be rattled by much. Got it back to the campus lot about 11:45. The owner picked it up. Good, she said. Thank you. She put the phone down. She thought about Marcus driving to school pickup at 3:15. She thought about Claire in the booster seat that had lived in the back of that truck. She thought about the math. $47 and some change, $340 fee, Friday paycheck, 2 daughters. She thought about the 9 days the portable restroom had been broken. She thought about what it cost, in a very specific and human way, to go to work for $19.50 an hour in a building that billed your labor out at 31. Diana was not a woman who had grown up without money. Her father had built Voss Industries from a regional HVAC firm, and she had grown up inside the security that came from that. She had worked hard for everything she had in the company. That was real. She had earned her place in it through years of grinding, difficult work. But she had never, not once in her adult life, done the math on a Tuesday afternoon, and concluded that she could not pay a fee before Friday. She thought about that now in a way she had not thought about it before, not with guilt, which was useless, but with the specific clarity of someone who has just had a blind spot illuminated and is deciding what to do with the light. She opened her laptop. She pulled up the last 4 years of subcontractor billing. Not just Clifton, all of them. Landscaping, cleaning, food service in the employee cafeteria, the security contractor who staffed the lobby. She was going to need time with each of these files, and she was going to need someone who could help her understand what was standard and what was extractive, and where Voss Industries sat on that line. She thought about the board meeting coming up in 2 weeks. She had 3 items on the agenda: a new product development initiative, a facilities expansion proposal, a quarterly financial review. She was going to add a 4th. Her desk phone rang. It was the head of her investor relations team, a precise and capable woman named Carol, who was calling about the delegation debrief. Diana took the call. She spent 20 minutes talking about capital projections and development timelines, and the very specific concerns the lead investor had raised about market positioning in the Southeast. She was present for all of it. She answered every question with her full attention. That was a discipline she had developed early. Whatever was in front of you got all of you. You did not give half of yourself to the meeting in front of you because the other half was somewhere else. But when the call ended, and she set the phone down, the file came back. Not just the file. Marcus came back. The way he had stood in her office without fidgeting. The way he had said, "I'm not asking her to care. I'm asking her to fix it, because she's the one who broke it." He had not been theatrical about it. He had not raised his voice. He had not played for sympathy. He had just said a true thing, in a plain way, and let it sit there, taking up all the space it deserved. She had heard thousands of presentations in her career. She had sat across from analysts and investors and consultants and lawyers and politicians, all of them skilled at making their words land exactly where they wanted them to land. She had a very good ear for when language was being used to move her, and when it was simply being used to communicate. Marcus had simply been communicating. That was why it had stayed with her all day. She worked until 6:30. She went through 3 more subcontractor files and made notes in the margin of a yellow legal pad. The pattern that was beginning to emerge was not surprising, but it was not comfortable either. Across most of the contracted services, the gap between what Voss Industries paid the contracting company and what workers actually received was significant. In some cases it was defensible. In others it was less clear. She was not naive enough to think she could fix everything with one policy shift. She knew how structures worked. She knew how change in large organizations moved, slowly and with friction, and how often the people who needed it most never felt its effects. But she had started. She called her driver. She gathered her bag. She stood by the window for a moment, before turning off the light in her office. The east wing was dark. The scaffolding was still up, its metal frames lit faintly by the security lights on the exterior wall. Tomorrow morning, 6 men would come back and continue the work they had been doing for 3 weeks. They would park their vehicles, walk into the building, and pull wire through walls for 8 hours, at wages that did not reflect what they knew or what they were worth. They would do this because the structure said they should, and the structure had not been questioned, and structures do not question themselves. She turned off the light. In the elevator on the way down, she stood alone and looked at the floor display ticking past each number. 14, 13, 12. She thought about a man standing in an empty parking space looking at the asphalt. No performance, no rehearsed lines, just a problem that had a shape, and the decision to go up and ask the person responsible to fix it. She had not expected him. She had not expected to spend her afternoon with his words arranged in the back of her mind, reorganizing things quietly. She had not expected to be grateful for a Tuesday, in the middle of an ordinary week. The elevator reached the lobby. The doors opened. She walked across the marble floor. The receptionist was gone. The headset was on the desk. The lobby was quiet, and lit in the flat, patient way of buildings waiting to be used again. Outside, Glenn was at the car. He held the door. She got in. "Home?" he said. "Home," she said. She looked out the window as they pulled away from the campus. The overflow lot was visible for a moment as they turned onto the main road. It was empty now except for 2 cars and a white van with a contractor logo on the side panel. The hedge had been trimmed. She could see the sign clearly from the road. She thought about Marcus picking up his daughters at 3:15. She thought about Claire in the booster seat. She thought about what it must feel like to drive to school pickup after a day like that one, to shift from the world of the problem back into the world of ordinary, constant love. She thought that might be the most demanding kind of shift there was. She turned away from the window. Tomorrow she had a meeting with legal and facilities at 8. She had a full review of the subcontractor portfolio to begin. She had a board meeting in 2 weeks that was going to include a conversation she had not planned for but could no longer avoid. She was not in the habit of being changed by a single conversation. She was not someone who ran on emotion or made large decisions in the middle of feeling things. She had built her entire professional life on the opposite of that. But there was something Marcus had said that she could not quite put down. Not a dramatic line, not a speech. Just the plain, steady statement he had made after explaining the full situation, before she had picked up the phone, in the moment when he was not sure yet what she was going to do. He had said, "I know you don't have to care. I'm just asking you to fix it, because you're the one who broke it." She had spent all day thinking about the second part, about fixing it, about the size of what fixing it actually meant when you looked at it directly instead of from a 15th floor window. She had not spent nearly enough time on the first part. She was the one who broke it. Not by being cruel, not by being careless, by being efficient, by trusting the structure, by staying on the 15th floor. The car moved through the city. The lights blurred a little at the edges as they passed. Diana Voss sat in the back seat, hands in her lap, and looked at the road ahead with the quiet, full attention of a person who has just understood something they cannot ununderstand. The yellow legal pad was in her bag. She had work to do. The meeting with legal and facilities the next morning lasted 1 hour and 20 minutes, which was 40 minutes longer than Diana had scheduled. She sat at the head of the conference table on the 14th floor, with a coffee she did not drink, and the yellow legal pad open in front of her. Across from her sat Neil Grady, the head of facilities, who was 53, and had been managing the physical operations of Voss Industries for 9 years, and was good at his job in the careful, consistent way of someone who had never been asked to look at it differently. Beside him was Carol Marsh from legal, who had a yellow pad of her own, a pen already in hand, and the expression of a lawyer who has learned to read rooms before she reads documents. Diana told them what she had found. She went through it in order. The billing rates, the wage data, the gap, the pattern across the vendor list. She did not editorialize. She gave them the numbers, and let the numbers do what numbers do when someone is finally willing to look at them. Neil was quiet for longer than was comfortable. Then he said what she had expected him to say, which was that the structure was standard, that subcontractor margins were a normal part of the arrangement, that Voss Industries was not the employer of those workers, that the legal exposure was minimal. Carol confirmed the last part. The legal exposure was minimal. What Clifton and the other contractors paid their workers was not Voss Industries' liability, provided the contracts were properly structured, which they were. Diana listened to both of them. Then she said, "I'm not asking about legal exposure. I'm asking about what we're actually doing." Neil and Carol looked at her. The distinction was one of those that seems simple until you sit with it. "We are paying Clifton $31 an hour per licensed master electrician," Diana said. "Clifton is paying those electricians $22. The safety walkthrough that is built into our facility's compliance protocol has not been completed on the East Wing project. The portable restroom unit on site has been inoperative for 9 days. Both of those last 2 items are in our contract with Clifton as deliverables. So we are not only managing a wage gap, we are failing to enforce the standards we contractually require." Neil reached for the contract file she had placed in the center of the table. He found the relevant clause. He read it. His expression shifted in the small, careful way of someone who does not want to be visibly surprised. "I'll get a compliance check on the site today," he said. "This afternoon. Diana said. Not end of week. This afternoon. Yes, Neil said. She turned to Carol. I want to know what it would take to restructure our subcontractor agreements to include a wage floor. Not as a guideline, as a binding requirement. If a contractor is billing us for labor at a certain rate, I want a minimum percentage of that rate to be guaranteed to reach the worker. Carol wrote something on her pad. That's not a standard clause, she said. I know it's not standard, Diana said. I want to know if it's legal and how to draft it. It's legal, Carol said. It will push back from the vendor side. Some of them will reprice. Let them reprice, Diana said. We review our vendor relationships every year anyway. We'll factor the new requirements into the renewal decisions. Carol kept writing. Neil kept reading the contract. Diana looked at the window at the end of the conference room. The city was bright this morning. Clear sky, early sun. She thought about the board meeting in 12 days. The agenda had 4 items now. The 4th was going to require a number. Not an estimate. A real number, built from real data, showing the full cost of what she was about to propose. She needed that number before she walked into the boardroom. I want a financial model, she said. Both of you contribute to it. What does it cost us, in real terms, to implement a wage floor across all active subcontractor agreements? What does it cost us to enforce compliance on the deliverables already in those contracts? What's the variance if vendors reprice versus if they absorb the margin change? I want 3 scenarios: conservative, moderate, and full implementation. Neil and Carol looked at each other. The look was not resistant. It was the look of 2 people quickly recalculating their week. What's the timeline? Carol said. 10 days, Diana said. I need it before the board meeting. The meeting ended. Neil left quickly, already on his phone to the facilities team, arranging the site compliance check. Carol gathered her notes with the focused efficiency of someone who had a clear task and was already designing the structure of it. Diana sat alone in the conference room for a few minutes after they left. She was not a woman who second-guessed decisions once she had made them. The decision was made. The path was clear. What she was sitting with was not doubt. It was the particular weight that comes from understanding the size of a thing you have been inside without seeing clearly. She had been inside this structure for 16 years. She had renewed contracts, approved rates, signed off on vendor relationships, and trusted the mechanisms she had built to surface problems when problems existed. Those mechanisms had not surfaced this one, not because they were broken, but because nobody had programmed them to look for it. Nobody had thought to ask whether the money was reaching the people doing the work. She had needed Marcus Deal to walk into her office without an appointment on a Tuesday morning, for that question to be asked. That bothered her. Not him. Not the asking. The fact that it had taken that. The fact that without that particular Tuesday, the question might not have been asked for another year, or 2, or 4. She stood up. She gathered her things. She had a full day ahead of her. Over the next 10 days, she worked. Not differently from how she always worked. She worked at the same pace, with the same focus, and she did not make a speech about it to her team, or send a memo explaining what she was doing. She just did it. Neil came back to her 2 days after the meeting with the compliance report on the East Wing site. The portable restroom had been repaired the same afternoon he called Clifton. The safety walkthrough had been completed within 48 hours. He had documented both. He had also, without being asked, flagged 2 other active sites where similar compliance gaps existed. Those were addressed in the same week. She did not praise him for it. She nodded and asked what the status was on the financial model. He said Carol's team was running the numbers and they'd have a first draft by end of the week. The first draft came on Thursday. It was dense and careful, the way Carol's work always was, and it laid out 3 scenarios with the kind of numerical clarity that either makes a decision easy or makes it look expensive. This decision looked expensive. Full implementation of a wage floor at 70% of billing rate across all active subcontractor agreements would cost Voss Industries an estimated $2.3 million in the first year. That number accounted for the vendor repricings Carol's team projected and the contract renegotiations that would need to be handled individually. In year 2, if vendors absorbed the change rather than walked away from the relationship, the number dropped to around $1.1 million as a sustained annual figure. The moderate scenario was lower in year 1, but narrower in scope, covering only the top tier of subcontractors by contract value. Diana read all 3 scenarios twice. She made notes. She asked Carol 3 follow-up questions by email, which Carol answered by the end of the same day. Then she opened her laptop and started writing the board presentation. She was a good writer. Not flowery, not stylized, but clear. She wrote the way she spoke, which was to say she wrote like someone who understood that the clearest path between 2 points is a straight line, and that the job of language is to travel that line without getting distracted. The section on the subcontractor proposal was 4 slides. The first was a summary of what the current structure looked like and what it produced. The second was the financial model. The third was the proposed policy change with a timeline for implementation. The fourth was what she called the standard argument, which was a single slide listing every objection a reasonable board member would raise and her response to each. The standard argument slide took her longer than the others. She had spent her career in rooms with people who were skilled at finding the financial case against any proposal that reduced short-term margin. She respected that skill. She had used it herself, more than once. But she also understood that the best way to move a room of financially sophisticated people was not to ask them to feel something. It was to take their own frame of reference and build the case inside it. The financial case for her proposal was not about the $2.3 million cost. It was about what that cost produced. She had Carol's team model 3 additional data points. The first was the long-term cost of high turnover in subcontracted labor, which was significant and well documented. Workers paid near market wages stayed longer. Workers who stayed longer built knowledge, moved faster, made fewer errors. She had the data from their own project histories showing the cost difference between high turnover and low turnover site crews. The second was reputational, not sentiment. Actual reputational value, measured in the vendor relationships and partnerships that were increasingly sensitive to supply chain labor practices. 2 of Voss Industries' largest commercial clients had ESG requirements built into their supplier agreements. The legal team had already flagged that those requirements were tightening. The third was simple. The compliance gaps that Neil had found, the restroom, the safety walkthrough, were gaps in contractual obligations Voss Industries was already bound to enforce. If a worker was injured on a non-compliant site, the exposure was not zero, regardless of what the subcontractor arrangement said. The cost of one serious incident on an improperly managed site could exceed the entire first-year cost of the proposed policy. When she was done with the financial case, she looked at it the way she looked at every presentation before it went to the board. She tested it for weakness. She found 2 places where the numbers needed tightening and sent them back to Carol. She found one place where the argument was relying slightly too much on the reputational data, and strengthened the legal compliance point instead. She did not add a personal story. She did not mention Marcus. She thought about whether to. She spent about 3 minutes considering it, and then decided against it. Not because it was not relevant, because the proposal needed to stand on the analysis. The moment it leaned on a personal narrative, it became possible to reduce it to sentiment, and she was not going to give anyone in that room the option to call this sentiment. It was not sentiment. It was a structural correction to a structural problem. 2 days before the board meeting, Marcus came down from the East Wing to her office again. This time Kevin had called ahead, so there was no moment at the door. He came in and sat in the chair across from the desk. He was not sure why he had been called up. His expression was careful, the way it always was, not guarded exactly, more like a man who had learned to wait and see before he decided how to feel about a thing. Diana told him she had done a compliance review of the East Wing site. She told him the restroom had been repaired and the safety walkthrough had been completed. She did not go into the details of the wage policy or the board meeting. That was not his business to carry before it was done. But she told him what had been fixed, because he had been the one to tell her what was broken, and she thought that deserved acknowledgement. He listened. He did not look surprised exactly. He looked like a man watching something he had not quite allowed himself to expect. "The restroom's been fixed for about a week," he said. "Yes," she said. He nodded slowly. "The walkthrough happened Monday." "Yes," she said. He was quiet for a moment. "Why are you telling me this?" She looked at him steadily. "Because you told me things I needed to know, and I wanted you to know they had been heard." He sat with that for a moment. He turned his phone over once in his hand. "I didn't come up here last week expecting anything to change," he said. "I came up because I needed my truck back, and you were the person who could fix that." "I know," she said. "I'm saying that I wasn't trying to start something," he said. "I wasn't looking for a bigger conversation." "I understand that," she said. "The bigger conversation was already there. You just happened to be in the room when I needed to have it." He looked at her. The careful expression held for a moment. Then, for the first time since she had met him, something in it relaxed slightly. Not fully, but enough to notice. "Is there anything else going on?" he said. Not nosily, just directly. He was the kind of person who asked what he wanted to know. "There are some things in progress," she said. "I'll be able to tell you more in a couple of weeks." He nodded. He stood. He looked at her with the same level, unhurried gaze he had brought to every interaction they had had. "I appreciate what you did with the truck," he said, "and the other things." "Thank you for coming up," she said. He left. She sat for a moment after the door closed. In 2 days, she was going to walk into a room with 8 people who collectively oversaw decisions affecting hundreds of millions of dollars, and she was going to ask them to spend $2.3 million to fix something that was technically not broken, legally not required, and financially not cost-free. She was going to ask them because a man had come into her office and told her the truth, in a plain voice without asking her for anything except what was already right. She picked up the presentation and read it again from the beginning. It was good. It was clear. It was built on numbers that held. She put it down. She had one more thing to add. Not a personal story. Not Marcus's name. Just a single line at the top of the 4th slide, before the list of objections, in plain language, that said exactly what this was about. She typed it. She read it back. It was 11 words. She saved the file. She was ready. The board met on the 2nd Thursday of the month, always. The boardroom on the 16th floor was 1 floor above Diana's office. She had always found that slightly symbolic in a way she had never quite articulated. The people responsible for the widest view of the company sat 1 floor above the person responsible for running it. It was the architecture of accountability, she supposed, or the architecture of distance, depending on the day. There were 8 directors. 4 of them had been on the board since before Diana became CEO. The other 4 she had recommended herself at various points over the past decade. She knew all of them well, the way you know people you have sat across from in difficult rooms for years, not always warmly, but thoroughly. The first 3 items on the agenda went as expected. The product development initiative drew the sharpest discussion, which was predictable, because it involved the highest capital commitment and the most speculative timeline. The facility's expansion proposal was approved with minor amendments. The financial review produced the usual round of questions about regional performance and a longer exchange about a specific market where margins had compressed over the past 2 quarters. Diana moved through all of it with her full attention. She answered questions directly. She did not rush. She did not signal, by tone or pace or body language, that her mind was elsewhere. Her mind was not elsewhere. She was fully present for every item. But she was also aware, in the background, of the 4th slide. When they reached the 4th agenda item, she paused. Not a long pause, just the half-second pause of someone who is about to say something they have prepared carefully and is taking one last moment to ensure the preparation is sufficient. Then she spoke. She presented the subcontractor policy proposal in exactly the order she had written it. Current structure first, what it looked like, what it produced. She did not use language like failure or exploitation. She used the numbers. The numbers were sufficient. She put the billing rate on the slide. She put the average worker wage beside it. She showed the margin gap. She showed it across the top 5 subcontractor relationships by contract value. She let the board look at it for a moment without filling the silence. Then she moved to the financial model. $2.3 million in year 1. The 3 scenarios. The long-term cost projections. The turnover data. The ESG client requirements. The legal compliance cost of a serious incident on a non-compliant site. She presented each point in the flat, precise tone of someone who has stripped every argument down to its cleanest form. When she finished the financial model, she moved to the proposed policy. Wage floor at 70% of billing rate. Binding contractual requirement. Phased implementation over 12 months. Compliance monitoring to be handled through the existing facilities function with a small additional staffing investment, the cost of which was already built into the year 1 number. Then she advanced to the 4th slide. One line at the top. 11 words. We will enforce what we already require and require what is right. Below it, the list of objections and her responses. She went through each one. The board was quiet in a way that was different from the quiet at the beginning of a meeting, when people are settling in. This was the quiet of people processing something they had not expected in the form it had arrived. Roger Aldous, who had been on the board for 11 years and had known Diana's father and had a habit of rubbing the edge of the conference table with his thumb when he was thinking, spoke first. "This isn't standard practice," he said. "No," Diana said, "it isn't. Our competitors are not doing this. Some are beginning to," she said. "Carol can walk you through the market data. But to be direct about it, I'm not proposing this because competitors are doing it. I'm proposing it because when I looked at what we were actually doing, I found that it needed to change." Roger looked at the slide. His thumb moved along the table edge. "What prompted you to look?" he said. The room was quiet again. Diana had thought about this question. She had known Roger would ask it, or someone like Roger would ask it, because Roger was a man who understood that the origin of a decision tells you something about the quality of the decision. She had decided not to answer it with the full story. Marcus had not asked for his name to be in a boardroom. He had come up to her office with a problem and left with it solved. That was the full extent of what he had wanted from the exchange. But she had also decided not to be vague, because vagueness was a kind of dishonesty, and she did not practice that in front of her board. "One of the subcontractors on the East Wing project came to my office 2 weeks ago," she said. "He had an issue that required my attention. In the course of that conversation, he answered some questions I asked him about conditions on the site. What he described led me to pull the full subcontractor file. What I found in the file led to this proposal." Roger looked at her. "What did he come to you about?" "A vehicle tow," she said. "A parking issue." The room was quiet in a different way now, the quiet of 8 intelligent people placing a piece of information in a context and understanding what the full picture looked like. "He came to you about a parking issue," Roger said slowly. "Yes. And that led you to a $2.3 million proposal." "His answers to my questions did," she said. "He did not come to me with this proposal. He came to me about his truck. I asked the questions. The questions led to the numbers. The numbers led here." Roger sat back. He looked at the slide again. He looked at the 11 words. "He just answered your questions," Roger said. "He answered them plainly," Diana said. "Without agenda, without leverage. He told me what he knew about his job, and his wage, and the conditions on the site, because I asked him to, and because he had no reason not to." Another board member, Priya Chandar, who was 58 and had spent the first half of her career in operations before moving to the investment side, and still thought in operational terms when problems were in front of her, leaned forward. "The 70% floor," she said. "How did you arrive at that number specifically?" Diana walked her through the calculation, industry data, overhead cost structures, the margin at which subcontractors could remain viable and competitive while the floor was in place. It was not arbitrary. Every number in the proposal had a source and a rationale. Priya asked 3 follow-up questions. Diana answered all 3. Then Stuart Nakemdi, the youngest board member at 44, who had a background in corporate governance and a habit of getting to things quickly, said, "What happens if 3 of our subcontractors reprice and 1 walks?" "We use the competitive bid process," Diana said. "We have a solid vendor market. We've reviewed it. The leverage is not as asymmetric as some of our longer-standing vendor relationships might suggest." Stuart nodded. "The ESG angle is real," he said. 2 of our Tier 1 clients have supplier standards that are moving in this direction. This gets ahead of that." "Yes," Diana said. "Which means the cost is not purely a cost," Stuart said. "It's also a risk mitigation investment. Carol's model treats it that way in the year 2 projection," Diana said. She advanced to the last slide. It was not a summary. It was a timeline. 12 months, specific milestones, assigned ownership. She had learned a long time ago that a board proposal lives or dies on whether the implementation plan looks real or aspirational. This one looked real, because it was real. She had already briefed Neil and Carol on the timeline before putting it in the deck. She stopped talking. The room stayed quiet. Roger Aldous looked at the table. His thumb was still. Priya was looking at the timeline. Stuart was looking at the window. The other 5 board members were looking at various points in the room with the expressions of people running internal calculations. Diana waited. The silence stretched long enough to be interesting. Then Roger said something she had not expected. He did not ask another question. He did not raise another objection. He said, "My father worked construction." Nobody responded. They waited. 40 years, Roger said. He was looking at the table. He worked for subcontractors most of his career. Never made what the billing rate implied. Always wondered why not. But he was not a man who asked that kind of question out loud. He paused. I never asked it either. The room was very still. Roger looked up. He looked at Diana. His expression was not sentimental. It was the expression of a man who had just placed something down that he had been carrying in a pocket for a long time without knowing it. Call the vote, he said. Diana looked at each member of the board in turn. She did not hurry it. All in favor of adopting the subcontractor compensation and compliance policy as presented, with the 12-month implementation timeline, she said. 8 hands. All 8. She noted it in the meeting record herself. The board meeting ended 17 minutes later. The usual housekeeping. The next meeting date confirmed. The minutes summary assigned. People gathered papers and phones and moved toward the door in the comfortable, dispersed way of a meeting that has finished without friction. Roger stopped beside her on the way out. He was a tall man, broader than he had been in the years she had first known him, with the unhurried physical presence of someone who no longer needed to take up space deliberately. That was a good presentation, he said. Thank you, she said. He looked at the window for a moment. Did he know? He said. The man who came to your office. Did he know what he was starting? No, Diana said. I don't think he did. Roger made a sound that was not quite a laugh, more like the sound of something confirming a suspicion. Those are always the ones, he said. He left. She stood alone in the boardroom for a few minutes. The chairs were still pulled out from the table at various angles, the disarray of a room that had just held 8 people trying to think clearly. She did not straighten them. She just stood and looked at the slide still up on the display screen. 11 words. We will enforce what we already require, and require what is right. She had typed them 2 nights ago at her desk at home, after reading the proposal one final time. They were not eloquent. They were not dramatic. They were just true. She turned off the display. She gathered her folder. She took the elevator down to 15. She went to her office. She sat at her desk. She looked at the campus below, and the East Wing scaffolding, and the overflow lot across the street. The lot was full today. Workers' vehicles, a couple of contractor vans, a white pickup on the far end. She could not tell from this height whether it was Marcus's. She thought about calling down to let him know what had happened. She picked up her cell and held it for a moment. Then she put it back down. He would find out. The changes would come down through the contract renegotiations, through the new rates, through the compliance structure. He would feel them before he understood where they came from. That was fine. That was how real change moved. Not with announcements. With better conditions on an ordinary Tuesday morning. She opened her laptop. She had 14 emails waiting. 3 of them were from Carol, who worked fast and was already thinking about vendor communication strategy. She replied to those first. Then she opened the rest and worked through them in order. At 3:40 in the afternoon, she stood up and went to the window. She thought about a man picking up his daughters from school, Claire in the booster seat, the 9-year-old probably telling him something complicated about her day, the way 9-year-olds did, with the full weight of whatever had happened loaded into the telling. She thought about what it meant to carry all the things Marcus carried, and still walk into a room on the 15th floor without trembling. To ask for what was right, because it was right, and because he was the kind of person who did not ask what happened to people who asked. She thought about Roger's father, 40 years in construction, never made what the billing rate implied. She thought about how many of those stories were walking around in the world, inside people who had made peace with the math not coming out right, because the alternative was too much to hold. She went back to her desk. She had a call at 4, then another at 4:30, then a report to review before tomorrow morning. She worked. Downstairs, in the east wing, Marcus pulled the last run of cable through a wall stud, secured it with a clip, and looked at his watch. 3 minutes until he needed to pack up. He was going to make it to school on time. He coiled his fish tape. He packed his tools. He zipped his bag. He did not know about the board meeting. He did not know about the 8 hands or the 11 words, or Roger Aldous and his father. He did not know that a financial model with his fingerprints all over it, in a way that would never be traceable, and that no one would ever formally acknowledge, had just passed a board vote that would reshape the labor arrangements for every contracted worker in the Voss Industries campus over the next 12 months. He did not know any of that. He knew his bag was packed. He knew his truck was in the lot. He knew Claire's booster seat was in the back. He knew his daughters got out at 3:15, and that the drive took 9 minutes with no traffic, and 11 with the light on Morrison Street, and that this particular Thursday felt, in the specific, low-key way of ordinary life, like a day that had not tried to break anything. That was enough. He walked out of the east wing. He crossed the lobby. He pushed through the glass door into the afternoon air, which was warm and moving, the kind of late-day air that carries the day's heat but has started to let go of it. He walked to his truck. He got in. He adjusted the mirror. He started the engine. He pulled out of the lot and drove toward Morrison Street. The light was green. He made it in 9 minutes.